help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. When she just came out, she told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. Happy 4th of July. The day that this podcast comes out is June the 27th, so great seeing many of y'all in Washington, D.C. at our Celebrate Life event for the historic day of the 1-year anniversary of Dobbs overturning Roe versus Wade. That was a great trip. We just got back, and now we are ready for the 4th of July to celebrate America and to celebrate George Strait, which is why I am wearing my George Strait hat. Somebody who is joining me on this 4th of July podcast and who also loves George Strait is Mr. Steve Carlin in Madison, Wisconsin. Steve, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy 4th of July, Sean. One of the finest days of the year is here.
Yes, and I know this is actually one of your favorite days of the year. As we've been forced to discuss on the podcast, you have a very dilapidated relationship with Christmas and a few other holidays, but 4th of July really gets elevated, and it's basically like it lasts 2 weeks for you.
Yeah, it does. The Christmas conversation was how early is too early to put up your tree and how late do you take it down. But there's just no wrong time to blow stuff up outside.
Americans consuming massive amounts of saturated fat, alcohol, and then saying, you know how we're going to close out today? We're going to start shooting up stuff and blowing things up. Hold my beer and watch this. So, yeah, it's a great holiday. It's wonderful. We're big 4th of July people, have been since I was a kid. We will talk about that. There's nothing like the 4th of July in East Texas, let me tell you. Somebody who I believe this year actually is celebrating the 4th of July for the first time in his life because of what we just celebrated, because of the overturning of Roe and his country losing their mind, I guess a little more so than America, is somebody who we welcome back to the podcast, somebody who we can thank for losing the American Revolution to our great outmanned, starving army that was led by General Washington and threw many of his relatives out of the country if they weren't shot because they were wearing a red coat in the woods of Virginia and New York. And that is Mr. Robert Colquhoun. Welcome back to the podcast, Robert, and happy 4th of July.
Oh, well, happy 4th of July. I'm not quite there in terms of celebrating the 4th of July yet, but looking forward to visiting America later in the year.
You're warming up to it.
We're warming up a little bit, but we've just had the coronation of King Charles here, so we've had an interesting last few years. But no, I'm still not a fan of Independence Day. I'm afraid not quite yet. Still a cultural aberration.
I have a question, Robert, because let me fulfill some stereotypes. And Steve, you please chime in because I may be outmanned on this. I could absolutely care less about King Charles. Once the Queen died, I think she's the last of it, and nobody cares about the royal family anymore. Now it's just totally. It had like this beautiful. She like represented just the old days, and she sort of her whole life spanned over such a long time, and she was so classy. that I think people had more respect for her. But now it's all the misfits and the dysfunctional, and you get the kids and Meghan Markle. All this garbage that nobody can. It really dropped off, I think, in dignity. So you as a Brit, is what I'm saying blasphemy? And it's like, no, this is our tradition. I respect it. I watched every second of it. It's awesome. Or even you sitting there going, I really don't care about these people anymore.
Well, the Queen certainly was universally popular, and Charles is less popular. There's always been like tabloid stories, etc. But there was a lot of street parties for Charles's coronation. But certainly, I think with Meghan and Harry is definitely taken the tone down quite somewhat. So, but there's certainly not any Republican sort of movement in the UK. So there's still monarchy's universally popular here, but it'd be interesting hearing kind of US perspective of what people think and what they read in the newspapers and media versus reality. So it's the pomp and ceremony we do very well. The coronation, what have you. You've got all the horses and the guards and the processions and all that is done extremely well. But I'm certainly not so much of a monarchist now, and a little bit more cynical these days. So.
This is not the proper thing for me to say during our 4th of July podcast, but I am, I feel like I could respect a monarch who actually ruled and was in charge. I can't figure out what the purpose of the monarchy is anymore. Waved at people a lot, and now you've got Charles, and he seems like he's expanding the job description to he is waving at people and he's lecturing us about climate change. Is that what it means to be a king in the 21st century UK?
So we had the thought crime legislation come in right at the same time as Charles's coronation. He's openly advocating, the Great Reset and climate change and all these kind of agendas as well. So, but at the same time, not actually making any laws, merely being a sort of head of state as a sort of dignified position rather than a politician. So that's really the nature of monarchy, and it's struggling to maintain relevancy in the modern age. And certainly, young people do not have the same kind of support from the monarchy. The support is right down for younger generations.
Steve, as part of Wisconsin royalty, do you care about the royal family and Charles?
Not the slightest bit.
Okay. All right, so Robert is outnumbered. Robert was bragging there were, quote, street parties for Charles, which is basically the Brits just using the excuse to go drinking again because they got a new king who no one likes. So, yeah, I think I agree with Steve. If you're going to have a monarchy, then you need a rule, and you need to be in charge, and you need to say that you were divinely appointed and all of those things that kings did. And you need to either come in and kind of kick butt and take names, or be the humble leader who's the king. You've got to have some kind of theme. They just don't do anything. And I think that's the frustrating thing. But I like talking about monarchies on the 4th of July because it makes me grateful for our country. And we're trying, many people, including himself, have tried to make Biden a king. And so, fortunately, that has failed. But I think there are Americans that definitely want a monarchy. They want like 3 people at the top telling us how to live as long as they get to choose the 3 people. So I'm still glad that we're free, even in the midst of so much turmoil in the United States. And how beautiful is it that we had the Dobbs decision? It was the Feast of the Sacred Heart. It was Nellie Gray's birthday, the founder of the March for Life. God rest her soul. She did not live to see the overturning of Roe. So June the 24th is just a great day all around. And then, of course, it's followed by the 4th of July. So I know we're going to talk about why the 4th of July is a pro-life holiday for the whole world. But I want to get into some of Steve's 4th of July traditions. I'm very interested in these. And I wonder if you have any that are just not typical.
I think they're fairly typical. That doesn't mean that they are dignified necessarily. But we do the same stuff I think everybody else does. We cook on the grill.
Is there a kiddie pool involved?
If there's kids around, there can be a kiddie pool involved. The stuff that's really enjoyable to me, and maybe I've matured on this a little bit over the years, but I have since my youngest days have a great love for fireworks, and these are one of those things you'd think you'd kind of grow out of, and still seeing something explode in the sky brings me deep and abiding joy.
Are these the fireworks you used to celebrate killing all my ancestors?
Yeah, we do, and this is Robert. I want to caution you here because it's been 6 months or so since you've been on the podcast, and you're just coming off of suspension. So you really got to be careful about what you're going to say here.
Yeah, Robert just got off COVID lockdown, right? like 2 weeks ago.
Well, I'm warming to Independence Day, but I thought Independence Day was getting rid of government tyranny, and that seems to be worse than ever in the United States. So, managed to get rid of the tyrant Brits, but then the tyrant government sort of has come back in a more malevolent form. So, there's that dynamic to Independence Day too.
Yeah, and we've discussed, Robert, last week, if you want to go listen to that Dobbs podcast, some of the great 4th of July movies, certainly this flies anti-American. The Top Gun 1 and 2, Jaws, but come on, Robert, The Patriot. I mean, Mel Gibson just coming after you. It's pretty awesome. So some good 4th of July movies out there. I know Robert doesn't agree with The Patriot. I don't know why. It's like historically inaccurate somehow to him. I guess he thinks the Brits won.
Before this war's over, I'm going to kill you.
4th of July is nostalgic for me because my grandparents had a lake house. They retired on a lake, and it was a lot of fun. It was nostalgic. We shot fireworks off into the water. It was just like great memories. We may have caught the boathouse on fire a couple of times, but no harm, no foul. And it was really awesome, but it was always substantive. It was always patriotic. Memorial Day weekend and 4th of July, I growing up, I always knew, and it was told to me many times, why we celebrated those things. It wasn't just, oh, you're off of school or you're off of work or you're going to go swimming or barbecue or shoot fireworks. All that was fun too, but I remember it always being very substantive. And I think that's important now as we have our corrupt, anti-life, anti-Catholic, anti-free speech DOJ, to really know what our country was set up for, why it was set up, why it has failed, why it has succeeded, and what our role is in it. And if we don't use our rights, we will lose our rights. So I think it's a very critical point. And one that going into the 4th of July, I know we'll emphasize to our kids, but that we're actually, and in all fairness, Robert does like the 4th of July because it does represent freedom. And it's a freedom, frankly, Robert, that England is getting away from, but can be reminded of.
Very much so. There's certainly, we've now got thought crime legislation here. We'll have national buffer zones. We've had a very controlling government for the last few years in addition to that, and so absolutely freedom is an important thing to emphasize. It's important for free speech, and America's been the bastion for free speech for so long. So even though culturally I'm not such a huge fan of Independence Day because of the history, but in the contemporary reality, freedom, patriotism, these are all good things, and I think 1776 is long enough time ago to not be within living memory of 3-4 generations. So it's quite a long time ago. So I'm not going to harbour any bad feelings about losing wars or what have you. The British colonial history is clearly over, but I'm sure the woke warriors can reclaim, reinvent your holidays to make them less anti-British.
We're just a few years away, just 3 years away from the 250th anniversary of 1776. And I think, Robert, that's got to be your goal, is by the 250th anniversary, you can be completely on board with this. And, you really can't knock it till you've been here for a 4th of July, Robert. One of my favorite things that I experienced on the 4th of July, it was snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat. I was in, I think maybe early college, and I had to work on the 4th of July. I was like, senior year of high school. Right leading up to that, I had to work on the 4th of July. I worked at McDonald's, my first real job, and I was working the drive-through, and I was.
Were you allowed to ask off, Steve? Were you allowed to ask off for the 4th?
I was, but I thought, why would any place be open on the 4th of July, the greatest day of the year? Everybody should be able to be at home blowing things up in peace with their loved ones and their friends and their family. So I just assumed that it would be closed, and I was shocked when I found myself on the schedule. And so my friends, they were going to do me a solid. I couldn't go to the fireworks because I was at work. So my friends brought the fireworks to me, and they started lighting off illegal fireworks in the parking lot of the McDonald's, which was great joy for me and
awesome.
A great memory to this day. And it kind of like got funny, though, because as soon as they were done and the fireworks like downtown ended, suddenly everybody coming back from the fireworks wants a Big Mac. And so the drive-thru is just full, and I'm like taking this order from this car, and he kind of points to the other side of the parking lot, and he sees like the smoldering remains of the fireworks. There's just excessive smoke coming off of this. And the guy ordering his Big Mac, he said, is that supposed to be happening there? And I just looked at him, and I said, yeah, I think so. And then there was no opportunity for me to do anything about it because the drive-thru is full. So another car comes through, and by that point, the smoking heap had just burst into flames, and there's now a fire at McDonald's from my idiot friends who brought me the fireworks because I couldn't go to the fireworks. So all of this is my long, winding, roundabout way, Robert, of saying, before you talk about whether you can be on board with the cultural aspects of it, you need to spend a 4th of July in the U.S., certainly Texas or Wisconsin. I don't know if Manhattan would be the place to do it. I don't know if San Francisco would be the place to do it. But you got to get where there's, people, freedom-loving, God-fearing Americans who do irresponsible things with pyrotechnics, and you may have a change of heart.
It's one of the greatest stories we've ever had on the podcast.
Yeah, I've never had the privilege of being in the US for Independence Day, but maybe in the future we'll see. So who knows where it'll be in 3 years' time for the 250th anniversary. Whether the Wake Warriors reinvent the holiday as something completely different by that stage, or the statues are pulled down and what have you, maybe not. I'm sure the patriotism is strong and alive in the US, so I can't see that happening.
And before or after is fine. I one time, around the same point in life, did a 9-day celebration of the 4th of July. It was like some kind of like, it was probably better and longer than your coronation was in the UK. But 9 straight days of 4th of July celebrations. So if you're here a little early or a little late, it's okay.
It will, as we've pointed out before on this podcast, the 4th of July is multiple days because July 2nd is when the aliens arrive in Independence Day. And so you've really got to observe that. So you have the 2nd, the 3rd, where it gets really bad with the aliens, the 4th, and then July 5th to me is part of the 4th of July. And then you just kind of move on and start, dreading the August heat. But, It is multiple days. It's multiple days. But I want to go back to something you mentioned, Steve, because I think we've mentioned this on the podcast, or maybe we've just talked about it, but it's a significant point to your expertise. You were the drive-thru guy at McDonald's? That's legit.
Yeah, it was at least better during the summertime. In winter, they put it a north exposure facing window. So you're like doing the dishes, and then you got wet hands, and you're trying to like handle coins. It was a really bad deal, but it was tolerable, and it was very enjoyable the rest of the year.
But you communicated. I mean, that's busy. That's really busy. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, especially when there's a fire.
That tends to change things. Is the parking lot on fire? No. What's that fire over there? How about those Milwaukee Bucks? Yeah, it's it definitely changes things. So that's kind of interesting. And of course, McDonald's open year round. At the end of my sophomore year in high school, I worked at Berkshire's grocery store, which was awesome. I was a bag boy, and now the bag boy's there. It's very Southern. It's great. Southern hospitality. You take the grocery cart out to the people's car. You unload their groceries. You're not allowed to accept tips. It's a very hospitable service, and I really loved it. It was my first job, and I had great bosses. I learned a lot at Berkshire's, actually. And I worked at their busiest store. And, of course, the heat's, like, brutal and all this. So you were not allowed to ask off for the 4th of July. It was one of the busiest days of the year. Everyone had to work, and don't ask off for it. So I didn't ask off for it. Then I got my schedule, and I was off the 4th of July. And I was like, I thought everybody, I was like, yeah, it's a great day for America. So I got the schedule, and I went to my manager and I said, hey, I think there was a mistake. I got off the 4th of July. And he goes, yeah, you were the only one that listened. You were the only one that didn't put in for it. Because basically everybody asks off for it thinking they're not really serious. Somebody's going to be off. And I guess they let the people off who don't ask. So it was unbelievable because, I mean, it's a huge thing in the summer. You have like weeks going in, and it's all a bunch of high school and college kids that work there. And so they're all like, yeah, we got to work on the 4th of July. And it was just, you're ready to do it. And all of a sudden I had this like get out of jail free card to go hang out with my friends and family and shoot fireworks and do all that cool stuff. So on that note, Steve, of 4th of July taking multiple days, what is your firework shopping situation? Because I go to the same stand every year. I generally buy the same fireworks. I know the people at the stand. It's at a truck stop over by my house. It's like a family that runs this fireworks stand. So we take a couple of kids. Do you buy more than you need so that you have it for the time between the 4th of July to New Year's Eve, or do you just buy it and what you buy you shoot off and then there's no fireworks until New Year's Eve?
It's going to be really a little bit of both because I buy with the intention that this should tide me over for longer stretches of time. But when you have a box of fireworks, it's very difficult to have this. I like to think I'm a self-disciplined person and I have self-control, but when you have fireworks just sitting there, it's very, very difficult not to use them. So they very rarely make it to tide me over during the lean seasons of the year where it's less socially acceptable to be blowing things up and lighting up the skies.
See, I want that, but this is even surprising about myself. But I don't. I shoot fireworks on 4th of July and New Year's Eve, and that's it. And even if they're left over, I'll just leave them there. And I don't know, part of me, I don't want to be that guy in the neighborhood. And where I live, we hear fireworks all the time. But I just don't want to be the guy that's like shooting off fireworks on like October 10th. So yeah, we don't stock up. We don't stock up.
We've talked about, my brother has a wiffle ball field. So we have a wiffle ball league. I am doggone near 40 years old and I'm still at playing wiffle ball
league. Did you?
Yeah, I've got a jersey. I can show you a shot of my jersey that
I would love. You've got to send us the jersey. Yeah. Well, hold on. What's the team name?
The Rip City Thunderducks. That is my team.
Mercy.
And that's actually reminiscent of the year that Robert asked us who was in the Super Bowl, and we said it was the Broncos and the Seahawks. And he said, what ridiculous, what preposterous names. But at the Wiffle Ball park, if someone hits a home run or wins a game or whatever, we're shooting up fireworks for that. It's like RBI baseball that you and I were talking about offline. We've got to do that. So we've got smoke bombs and fireworks and everything there for home run celebrations.
Robert, do you know what Wiffle Ball is?
Is it like American football with a sort of ball that makes a noise or something? That's the best guess. I'm still.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Conversation between two paramaniac. This is a conversation between two paramaniac addicts who are letting off fireworks, celebrating killing my ancestors, and now they're talking about this crazy sport I've never heard of.
I'll take that. I'll sign on that deal. That's what's happening.
What is wiffle ball? Is it like with a dog or something, or
It's baseball, except it's a plastic red bat, big red bat,
right,
and a plastic white ball. And you make.
Is
we
this
used
culture?
to like. Yeah, no, my grandparents had like acreage. We'd go out and like mow the field and weed eat, like a pattern and like just make a field in the middle of nowhere and play wiffle ball. So yeah, you can pretty much play wiffle ball anywhere, any front yard, backyard. It's fake baseball and apparently is it the rubber ducks? Is that right?
Thunder Ducks.
Thunder Ducks. Oh, much more intimidating. Bring the thunder, Steve. Bring the thunder, Thunder Ducks. And apparently they're going to make a run at the championship. Do you have a trophy, Steve? I think I know the answer to this.
It's actually about 3 feet to the right of me. It's called the Sempiternal Cup of Wonderment.
Oh, this is great.
And this is what happens when
Can
you get
grab it?
When you get
gotta
rid of the
grab
people
it.
in charge. This is what happens. It's like Lord of the
Steve
Flies.
is going
You know, this is what
to
happens.
get the trophy. The Thunder Ducks. I gotta see this thing.
Wow.
Yes, I'm
Oh,
not
that's
supposed to have this
awesome.
right now because I just 2 days ago I lost the championship game. We were the favorites. We were undefeated on the day, and then we lost in an upset. It's like we're playing the team the third time in the tournament. It's like the NFL playoffs. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in the same season. And so we dropped it, we lost it, but I forgot to bring the trophy. So the rightful owners and possessors of this trophy no longer have it.
Is it real gold? What's the trophy made out of?
Freedom.
Plastic.
Oh, mercy. This is brutal. Oh, this is great. Okay, so first off, I want to defend the Thunder Ducks. And Steve, you can correct me, but I think I'm going to speak for the Thunder Duck fan base and sponsors and everybody else. I don't think the Thunder Ducks are woke. They're not inviting the perpetual indulgent sisters, Dodgers. The Thunder Ducks are true America-loving, God-fearing wiffle ball professionals, and we can just see it in that trophy. So I do want to call out to them that they before you bash them and before you write Steve off as not a legitimate professional athlete, which I'm very tempted to do, obviously, you need to know the Thunder Ducks, they're not woke. How have we missed this? This is the first time I've heard the term Thunder Duck. Hopefully it's the last. But I didn't even know you were part of a wiffle ball league, that you had a trophy, that you were a Thunder Duck.
It's one of those things where like I've got enough self-awareness to know that like it's okay if I do this in my free time, but I probably don't want to be telling a lot of people about it, you know?
This is the problem. So our work relationship was the barrier of me learning that you, in secret, were part of a professional wiffle ball league. Is there an MVP award?
Yes. The spring tournament, you get a ring. There's an actual honest-to-goodness championship ring. And then the fall, you get a jersey that commemorates that you were the league fall tournament champion. So there's kind of like, it's like golf. There's not just like one champion. There's like the majors. There's 2 majors, and then there's a lot of games in between.
Okay. We are going to shift
Mighty
from
Ducks.
that. Yeah. So, Thunder Ducks, Robert. Thunder Ducks. Not Emilio Estevez, Mighty Ducks.
Mighty Ducks.
These are the Thunder Ducks. Okay, real quick, so we can give the listener and the viewer something besides the Thunder Ducks, which I think... I just want to know people's opinion of this. Does this increase or decrease your opinion of Steve Carlin? Email us at podcast@40daysforlife.com, podcast@40daysforlife.com. Steve Stock, as a proud trophy-bearing, even though they just lost the championship, Thunder Duck, that helps your opinion of Steve or maybe takes it away. And I really want to hear from you wonderful 40 Days for Life folks in the great state of Wisconsin, because this is the fruit of your state. Steve is I think the best pro-life leader in Wisconsin. That's why he works for 40 Days for Life. I did not know, however, he was indeed a Thunder Duck. So you learn something new every 4th of July. Okay.
Certainly, Steve, great stuff. If that's professional, hats off. Mighty Ducks, go Mighty Ducks.
We know
Very
Steve
impressive.
on the side is raking in that lush Thunder Duck salary with his end of year playoff bonus. All right, so we as we mentioned earlier, we defeated Robert's ancestors so that we could have Thunder Ducks and 4th of July and everything else. But the 4th of July is a pro-life holiday. And it really starts, and we'll go to Mr. Thunderduck. So many people need to read it, I think, for the 4th of July, but the Declaration of Independence, written by Jefferson. Of course, they signed it on, it was presented on the 2nd. They signed it. They had some edits, and they signed it on the 4th, and that was the official day. But it's a brilliant, brilliant document. And when you read it, you realize Thomas Jefferson was a genius.
There's that great JFK line where I think he had assembled at the White House a dinner of Nobel Prize winners, and he proclaimed that there has never been such an assembly of brilliance in the history of the human race, except for when Thomas Jefferson dined there alone. And he is great. And it's interesting to me. I don't know if you've encountered this, but I've kind of run into some people as we see some of the problems with our country right now and the countries with Western civilization. There's some folks who are kind of like writing off the American experiment as though, it's Enlightenment ideals. This was always bound to end in bloodshed and the rejection of God and the dictatorship of relativism. And I disagree, because the Declaration of Independence, whatever problems, you can point out to problems with the founders, and that is certainly what the woke movement has done. But undeniably, from the first sentence on, the Declaration of Independence respects the dignity of the individual. In my opinion, if you look at history, every sort of civilization from, whether it's like ancient pagans to modern pagans, there's sort of like this collective sort of like hive mentality, and you've got no problem sacrificing human beings, particularly children, for supposedly the greater good. And it's only through, I think, the incarnation of Jesus Christ, the Judeo-Christian tradition, that we see a value on the individual, that the individual has rights that are beyond and outside of the nation, outside of the hive. And that's what I think the Declaration does such a great job of articulating, that we have those unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is great stuff.
And Robert, I mean, one of the things, and this is a problem in Europe especially, but we always talk about, we do this out of love of God, we do it out of love of country, but without children, we don't have a country. Without Brits having little Brits and Americans having little Americans and Italians having little Italians, you don't have a country. And you see Europe, which is essentially becoming Muslim, particularly France and Germany and Italy, because they're dependent on immigration. The Muslims are having a lot of kids, and they're moving into Europe. And this contraceptive mentality, certainly the abortion mentality and the abortion reality that we're having so many abortions in these countries, there's not going to be a future if we're not having children.
Absolutely. And, what's fresh about America is a young country, it's vibrant, there's enthusiasm, there's inspiration, there's people who dream. And, in Europe, we have the cultural heritage of Christianity, but we have lost the faith. And certainly, the birth rate is down in many European countries. I was just in Holland last weekend, and they have the Groningen Protocol there, which allows you to allows child euthanasia. They changed the law in April 2023 to allow child euthanasia up to 12 years age. This weekend, I'm going to be in Italy, where the birth rate is about 1.2, and certainly in the UK, it's under the 2.1 replacement level. So, we're getting an increasingly elderly population in Europe. And, we have the history, we have the culture, we have the architecture, but we don't have those values coming through to young people. And, in America, there is a lot of faith, and that is not evident in Europe. And that's a challenge, like recruiting leaders and connecting with new people. There are many good people out there in society, but, we're looking at a continent that has much more radically turned away from faith. So we can make fun of Independence Day and the history and Wiffle Ball and what have you, but at the end of the day, there's a strong faith-filled contingent in the USA. We've got atheism, we've got lack of faith, we've got all these challenges in Europe. So those are cultural challenges, especially for 40 Days for Life, for pro-family, pro-life organizations. How do we share our values with an increasingly hostile public, and how do we share our values in the public square? They're needed more than ever, but it's increasingly more challenging to be able to do that in Europe.
It's interesting. In America, and Steve, we've referenced this, we've made fun of it a lot, but in America, we have these two extremes. Like, we struggle with our own identity. Either we are it, and we have never done any wrong, and we are the city on a hill, and we're better than everybody else, and it is American exceptionalism, which Trump hated that phrase, ironically. And we're just the best. Pro-America, hand over heart, right? That's the stereotype. Or 2020... we're awful, we have never been good, and we can never be good, and we're irredeemable because of slavery. And there's just always this, I don't even want to say struggle, because that legitimizes it, but this unreasonable approach to the history of the United States. And maybe it's because we are the superpower of the world, so you got to pick it apart and maybe overanalyze. But it was wrong that our founding fathers had slaves. Slavery was wrong. We overcame slavery, despite what people say on ESPN about the NFL draft being no different than the slave trade, which is just absurd. You hear all these ridiculous things. It is amazing. 64% of white people in the United States voted for Barack Obama. It is good that we elected a black president. It's very good. It shows where we came from, even though he's a terrible president. That was the problem. It was this constant back and forth of you are either against all America and it's irredeemable, or you're completely for it. And I just think that's so unhealthy. And we got to read this Chesterton quote, because we can brag about Thomas Jefferson and criticize him. Washington was the only founding father who set his slaves free upon Martha's death. The others did not follow suit, although it's well documented that Thomas Jefferson had a lot of conscience issues with even writing the Declaration of Independence and men being created equal. He actually had a comment in there about slavery, basically mentioning it, how they're really not all equal in America, and they ended up taking that out. But anyways, this is the Chesterton quote that we all should focus on, whether you're a proud Englishman, a proud American, a proud Frenchman. Chesterton says, "We don't love our home because it's the best. Because we love our country, we strive to make it the best."
Yeah, I'd say that's paraphrased. It's accurately sums up the sentiment, but like many things Chesterton, he took about 6 pages to get that out. So it's not a
that
direct
was actually
quote,
a 6-volume book by Chesterton that we just kind of condensed for the sake of the podcast listener.
It's referencing letters to the editor from the 1800s that the newspaper had gone out of business by the time Chesterton was writing. But if we want to distill it down, I think that's what he was trying to say.
It was. And that's why we do that. Otherwise, gentlemen, enough of this peaceful, prayerful, hopeful garbage that we do at 40 Days for Life. Let's go burn it down. We've killed 64 million of our own children. Let's storm every building. Let's be violent. Let's forget everybody and go rip down all the statues we can possibly find, despite who the person is or why they ever existed or what they did. We can do that because America's irredeemable. But we don't believe that. We don't believe that. And it's not true. And if it were true, it would be true for every country, and you couldn't live anywhere. We've talked about it before. Yeah. There's Mercedes-Benz all over the road. Auschwitz was liberated 78 years ago. It's nothing. Nothing's blink of an eye. They're ripping the gold teeth out of the Jews, and they're gassing their children right on the spot. 1.3 million people died at Auschwitz, and people go. There's German beer houses everywhere. It's all throughout Europe. People drink Becks. People drive Mercedes. People hire Germans. No country. Look at England. England's got Mel Gibson aside. England, America, France. Everybody has their, quote, dark history, some to the more extent than others, there's no doubt. But this whole notion that we can't correct an error and move on, that we are stuck in the past, is anti-Christian. It's anti-redemption.
Yeah, you've got to have a healthy sense of national identity, and if you don't, if it's all self-depreciating, then that's extremely unhealthy and very destructive. So, I mean, there's plenty of things that are great about Britain from our Christian heritage, and, think of Newman, Chesterton, Tolkien. We've got these incredible saints going back to Thomas Becket, Thomas More. We've got this wonderful heritage that goes through centuries, let alone the architecture, the geography, the vast difference in geography across such a small island, let alone the international influence that we've had. So you've got all these people saying, how terrible the colonial era was, but, really that's historical revisionism of just, tearing down these statues and stuff is extremely unhealthy. We're not supposed to judge history. We're not supposed to impose our own values of today, our own woke agenda on the sort of historical narratives. So whether, a slave owner was a good or bad person, it shouldn't give us the right to pull down a statue or what have you. And, if you want to let off fireworks on the 4th of July, then good stuff, and play wiffle ball, then good on you. You need a healthy sense of national identity, and I can have a dig at you for having funny culture with Bucky and what have you. And
Bucky,
but there's plenty of great things. Plenty of great things about America too. So there's extremes. There's good and bad. But to celebrate what it is good about the country, and there's forgiveness of the past. There's bad things that have happened in the past, but ultimately, if you can't move on as a country, then it's self-depreciating, and we have to celebrate what is good about our countries, regardless of whether our leaders are good or bad. If we have good or bad governments, so good on you for these national celebrations, even if they are anti-British.
Hey, just threw that in at the end. I like how you're starting, even, Robert, to build up the colonial era again. Subtly, I see that coming. And
bring back the empire. Make the British Empire great again. Yeah.
Make the world England. Isn't that the phrase? But
make Charles a global despot once again.
Robert, we had no business declaring war on you guys. I mean, absolutely no. We talk about sports a lot and like some of the greatest upsets. I mean, that was arguably, if not the greatest upset, definitely the top three of any war ever, were the Americans throwing England out of their country. What it speaks to, Robert, in the sports analogy, is the tremendous home field advantage that we had, and the brilliance of General Washington. He was brilliant. Now, is there a statue of General Washington in London? I know you have Lincoln.
Yeah, there's Lincoln in Parliament Square, but there's certainly not Washington, not in the UK. There is Montgomery, I think. Montgomery's on Whitehall, but no, he was a Brit, I think. So, but yeah, Lincoln's the only American statue I can think of in London. Yeah, Churchill's there as well.
I don't think George Washington was very popular, but a great upset, and so a wonderful thing that we were able to accomplish. Now, this whole notion, because it is, I think the 4th of July needs to be a hopeful day. That may be common sense to some people, but I do find that people get worn on the cynicism, and they use 4th of July. There's angry 4th of July guy. An angry 4th of July guy can't get over all the problems that we have as a country. He can't get over the abuses of government. He can't celebrate his country because he's so upset with what it's become. And I think there's a healthy balance to that. We should be upset. We should be furious with what's happened in our country, and the way that people are being treated, and the way that we've dehumanized the unborn and redefined marriage as if we have the authority to do that. I tell you, a great uplifting 4th of July thing to do, if you're an American, is to go and read Justice Scalia's dissent in the gay marriage case. The only case where all the conservatives wrote a dissent. It's brilliant. But the late, great Justice Scalia's dissent is one of the most brilliant legal and funny legal documents you will ever write, where he basically says we just have granted ourselves the authority to change civilization as we know it because we went to Harvard or Yale. So it's a great patriotic thing to do. Even though that did not go the direction that we wanted, there should be discontent with the state of our country, but that should not lead us to despair. Christians don't have that luxury, and it should give us resolve. I think 4th of July motivates me to make America a better country, to live our faith in the public square, although they're trying to take that away in certain places. You can pretty much still do it everywhere. We do it with 40 Days for Life. So I think it's important to have a cheerful attitude and to truly be grateful, particularly because there have been so many men and women who have gone through very difficult times in the United States, times of poverty, times of war, times of persecution, and they have sacrificed everything so that we could have our freedom. And they didn't get to complain about everything. I mean, World War II was a decade after the Depression. I mean, that's just nothing. And it was just one thing after another during that time period. So I really think we're quick to complain about the good old days, but there really are no good old days in reality.
There's also the fact, too, that we need to have, I think, a sort of a sense of grounding in that. I get that we're America and we're unique as a country because we're sort of founded on an idea. Many countries, the country exists because there's a mountain here and there's a river there, and so our country is the place in between. Or we speak this language here and they speak that language there, so we're a country and they're a country. We've got kind of this unique thing where our country is founded on an idea, and where that idea is no longer shared, we run into some of the fragmentation and the atomization that we've seen these last few years. And I think that's where some of this sort of self-hatred comes from in our country. But at the end of the day, when we talk about loving our country, we're not loving the politicians of our country. That seems like a strange concept to me, that unless you like your country's politicians and all of their laws, you can't love your country. A country is so much more than that. It's the history that you just shared of our grandfathers who liberated Europe, and it's the ground that our food grows in, and it's our neighbors. It's actual people that are trying to make a living and do their best and raise their children. And those are the things that family are. I love when you kind of go through, customs. If you come back, I was coming back from Canada and the Canadian March for Life last month, and you go through the customs room, and it's not Biden up there on the mural. It's not Trump up there in the mural. It's not even like Reagan or Lincoln. It's a boy playing Little League baseball, and it's a cornfield, and it's it's Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. Those things should be completely beyond politics, and those are the things that we should be finding sort of a common heritage and a common unity in. And everybody seems to want to throw that baby out with the bathwater because there are also bad things that take place, as there are in every culture and country.
Listen, there's three great things about America. Three F's of what's great about America: freedom, faith, and family. So, freedom's obviously pretty obvious: freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of thought. Faith, very strong feel faith in the United States. Half the country goes to church regularly or more. And then family values, as we were talking about, the birth rate being higher in the US and family being strong. Those three things are under threat in the UK of freedom of speech, freedom of thought under threat here, of faith with the secularization here, and also family values being with the birth rate, as we discussed earlier, so low. So land of the free because of the brave, or whatever it is. Those are the three things I love about America, despite the extremes either end of, the extremes that we talked about of extremes of societies, hot and cold and what have you. Then those are the things that I love about America.
Yeah, and it's so well said by both of you. And I know we've had a lot of fun on this podcast, and it's a holiday weekend and week for a lot of people. But make a resolve, make a resolution to do something for your country. We always talk about that at New Year's Eve. Make a pro-life resolution. Going into the new year, make a pro-life resolution. America's the hope for the world with abortion. And shamefully, we've helped export it to so many different countries. And yet, we're the hope for the world when it comes to abortion. I mean, we talk about Hitler and we talk about all these really bad people in the past. And they were bad. But we act as if they don't exist anymore now. Or their ideas don't exist. And there's no invader, okay? We killed 64 million of our own children. There's 78 million abortions around the world every year with the support of 94% of the governments in the world. We've just never had a genocide on this level from within by the sheer numbers alone. And that can't overwhelm us because yet America, who gave abortion to so many places, particularly in Latin America, and in Africa, now still promoting it. We're also exporting the solution, and we're ending it quicker than any country in the West for sure. And so, really make a resolution for all you Yanks out there, all the Americans. Make a resolution to do more for your country. We have tons of free resources. Listen to this podcast. Watch the podcast, get one of the books, buy some gear and take it out to your Planned Parenthood and pray. Find your 40 Days for Life 365. We just closed applications to lead a 40 Days for Life this fall. It'll be a huge campaign. There are many abortion facilities that are going to continue to close in a post-Roe America. And we will be doing many things, and we'll have a lot of announcements coming out over the next few months of ways that you can protect free speech and ways that we are going to protect free speech as well. And that is needed because that is our heritage. And if we lose that, who cares? If we lose our freedom to assemble, our freedom of religion, if we can't do that, if we just have to submit to the LA Dodgers and their insanity, then it's a dark day. And we're just not there yet. We're not there yet. There's a lot of hope in our country. And, we see all that stuff on the media and things. But Steve, your point was so good about it's kids playing baseball. It's Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. It's all these things that's what you see in America. There's only so much that politicians can do. Ultimately, it is up to the people. So I just want to close with that and encourage people to do something. Be sure to get your patriotic gear also. 40daysforlife.com. I ran into a laundry situation where I couldn't wear my 40 days gear. I'm wearing my Y'all Wish t-shirt, which you can order from Buc-ee's. If you want to make, Rick Robert wants to make the world England. Many people want to make America Texas. These are just great t-shirts. They're red, white, and blue. So y'all wish, Robert. Y'all wish you were part of our country. Okay, so thank you, Steve. Thank you, Robert. Please rate, review, and share this podcast. And remember, regarding the Thunder Duck situation with Steve, did that help your opinion of him? Hurt your opinion of him? Email podcast@40daysforlife.com, and we will definitely be reading those emails on air. So thank you, gentlemen. Happy 4th of July, and we will see you next time. God bless you.